Boker Tov, Moedim L'Simcha, Chagim L'Zmanim L'Sason, Chag Sameach L'Kulam. Today's daf is Daf Nun Vav in Bab Mציעא, as we learn Parachenu Kol Beis Yisrael Sur Masar V'Shivya, and also for the Ilui Neshama of our good friend Moshe Smith's father, Baruch ben Avram David Smith, whose yahrzeit is today. Tes Zion Nisan. We're at the 10th line on Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. This is really a continuation of yesterday's daf. Yesterday we taught the issue really was the point in the Mishnah that you have to pay an extra fifth, not only if you ate truma by mistake, but even trumas meiser. Meiser you go to the Levi, but from the meiser you give to Levi, you have to give 10% to the Kohen. The Levi has to give that. So that's also called truma, but it's only drabanan if it's trumas meiser of tamai. Yet the Mishnah says you still add on a fifth. So Rabba asked the kasha, or Rabba brought down that Rabbi Lazar had a kasha. Trumas meiser is only drabanan. Did the drabanan make the same stringency as a doraisa? By doraisa, if you ate truma b'shogeg, you have to not only pay it back and it becomes truma and add on a fifth or 25%. We've explained, but even in a case which is only drabanan, you have to add that on too. That's what the kasha was. So Masa Ravina, that was one kasha that the Gemara asked. The Gemara gave an answer and said, well, it goes like Rav Meir. That was Rav Shmuel's answer. It goes like Rav Meir, who's machmir even by drabanans, as we say in the case of gittin. So now the Gemara is going to ask another kasha. Masa Ravina, if you buy loaves of bread from a baker, and the baker is an Amoritz, and he has all kinds of breads that he might have gotten there from different people. Ma'aser menachama says you can take meiser even from a fresh one, like a warm bread, on a cold one. Let's say you have several loaves there. You could take meiser from a warm one on a cold one, that for right, from on a cold one. Or menatzonenes alachama. So when you give meiser of good on something which is more stale, like cold or stale, that's for sure is okay. But even menatzonenes alachama, even from a lousy bread, a cold or stale bread on a warm one, that's okay too. Even if you're giving it from different forms, meaning it clearly came from different ovens, different bakers, because it's from different ones that were mayor, even though you might be given fechiyav al ptur or ptur al. Why? Because maybe, what is demai? Demai, you're buying from a nachdom, a baker who bought from different people. Some of them, those are all amaratzim. Some of them may have given meiser, some may not. Remember, many of them did give meiser, but some didn't. But if you give from something which is chayiv meiser on something which is not chayiv meiser, so that's menachiyav al ptur, it's not really meiser. And if you gave from ptur al chiyav, you weren't even yotzei. The chiyav is still really tevel. You can't eat it. So you're giving meiser on the breads that you bought from Amaratzim. No, on bread, challah. Yeah. They bought it already from them. They're from Amaratzim. Right, not talking about giving challah, talking about meiser itself. Because Rav Amaratzim give truma for sure, because there's no measure for that. Any amount is good, but from meiser they don't all give. So
what's the challah
on the chita? No, on the breads. Challah, the challahs themselves. Yeah. You're supposed to give obviously on the wheat as soon as it's ready, right? As soon as you finish the process. But over here you're buying from Ratzim who didn't do anything. All they did is bake bread without taking anything off except for truma. So now you're giving meiser from them. So if you give from warm on cold or cold on warm, meaning stale on non-stale, even from different, you can do that. So I understand why you can give from cold or from stale bread on warm bread, fresh bread. So you didn't give the best stuff. But I don't come in a row. How do you give truma from the bad stuff? There's not the choicest stuff on good stuff. It's okay. You'll carry a sin when you give truma of the fat stuff on it. In other words, you should always give from the best stuff. But if you give from the bad stuff, you're going to have a sin. Oh, you're going to have a sin, but it's still truma. If it didn't work at all, what's the sin? You didn't give truma. The answer it's a famous memory of many places in Shas. From here you see that if you gave truma from bad on good, meaning from stale or not so good stuff on good stuff, they're all chayiv and truma. It's okay. That's fine. I understand why you can give from stale on good. Fine. You didn't give the choicest stuff for truma. But how can you get from different forms, meaning from different people, different kitchens, different ovens who made this? In other words, when he bought the nachdom, the baker got from different housewives, whoever made the bread, maybe some gave and some didn't give. And if you give from chiyav al ptur, right, from chiyav al ptur, you didn't accomplish anything. It's not meiser. And he gave from ptur al chiyav, comes out that the chiv is still tevel. And this is the meiser you're going to give, and you're going to give the trumas meiser from that, and the coin's going to eat tevel. Rabaya. So Abaya said, so how could you do that? So, but what do you see from over here? You see from over here that Rav Meir is not so makbid. On yesterday's daf, we said, oh, why do you have to give even from Trumas Meiser? If you ate Trumas Meiser of Demai, you have to give, you have to add on a chomesh also, 25% or fifth onto that too, even though it's only drabanan. Oh, Rav Meir's makbid on drabanans. Here you see about Rabbanan, he's not makbid. He says you can give. You're not worried about maybe you'll give from a chiyav al Torah chiyav. Rabaya, so Rabaya explains the whole Gemara now that we had this whole thing from yesterday's Mishnah on. Rabaya, Rav Meir Shapiro kashle. Lezer had a good kasha. Why is he makbid on? Tamai? Tamai is only drabanan. Why is he so makbid on a drabanan? And you made it like a doraisa that if you ate truma drabanan, meaning of Tamai drabanan, you have to add on a fifth. It's only drabanan, so that's a good kasha. Ushmuel lo Shapiro Shmuel didn't give an answer. Why he didn't give his answer wasn't good. The kasha Rav Lezer misa v'dei shemayim. He has the kasha from truma. If you ate truma by mistake min Torah, if you did it for mezid, you're chayiv misa v'dei shemayim, not misa b'dei adam, which is more chomer that bezin could kill you. Misa shemayim. Shmuel gave an answer. Misas bezdin gave him an answer. Oh, you see where Meir's makbid. He might have said, what was the case he was makbid? That if he said, Meir said that if a man gave a get, you sent a get, maybe get dinas yam. Remember, you sent a get with a shliach. He has to say b'fanei nech getting of getting. If he didn't say it, if he gave her the get and he didn't say it, the kids are mamzer, says Rav Meir. What do you mean mamzer? Mitzvah, it's a good get. The rabbi said you should say b'fanei nech, just because you weren't a yoseh a drabanan to say b'fanei nech, and she got married based on that without the shliach saying b'fanei nech because of that the kids are mamzer. Rav Meir says yeah. So he's asking a kasha. Yes, kasha. You see, Rav Meir is very mock, but even a drabanan. Rav Meir says kol mishan mi'mapeya. Begetting Yotzi Vavlad Mamzer. You have to leave that second marriage, and the kid that you had from that second marriage is a Mamzer because the first marriage wasn't really divorced. So he asked him a kind, and Shmuel says, "Oh, you see, Rav Meir is very makbid. Yeah, Rav Meir is makbid by Misa B'dei Shemayim. Yeah, by that's Eishes Ish. I'm sorry, Misa B'dei Adam, which is Eishes Ish. There he's makbid because that's more stringent." Right? There's different levels, right? If you're only over an alav, that's only malchus, right? If you're over on something which is kares or misa b'shemaim, that's more stringent. If you're over on something which is misa b'de'adam, like adultery, that's more chumrah. So maybe over there Rav Meir is makbid. So his kasha Shmuel al Shapiro kamashani lay. The kasha Rav Lezer b'shemaim, which is truma, umashani Shmuel misas bezdin. Oh, that's more chumrah. Dil mashani misas bezdin the chamir, that's more stringent. Rav Sheshes, then Rav Sheshes has another kasha near the bottom of yesterday's daf on Amid Beis. From what? From when you redeem kesef al kesef. When it comes to demai, you could do kesef al kesef, techoshes techoshes, kesef al cheshes. What do you mean? If a mayor so makbid by regular meiser, you can't do that. You're not only allowed to do that bedochek. Rav Sheshes lo shapir kamosel like to come like misa. We're talking about misa. Rav Meir's makbid. When it comes to Misa, whether it's Misa B'Yad, Misa B'Shemayim, he's very makbid about that. And he says even if there's an Isser Drabanan involved, he's very makbid. But Rashesh's kasha is only from being from redeeming Meiser Sheni for money, right? That's only Drabanan. If you ate Meiser Sheni in Tel Aviv without redeeming it, so you're over on I'm not a Drabanan. It's only a lav. It's not the Misa. So Rav Meir's been talking about Misa, right? Like eating truma b'mezid, which was chayiv b'mezid. If you're a zar who ate truma b'mezid or a kohen who ate b'mezid when he was tamei, chayiv misa b'shemayim, and getting misa b'de'adam. We're talking about misa, and you're asking me a kasha that Rav Meir is not so makbid when it comes to being mechalo meiser sheni, because he said when it comes to meiser sheni of demai, any kind of kesef, the choshes al kesef, you can do whatever you want. The choshes al peiros. But when it comes to, we have a Mishnah which says when it comes to Meiser Sheni Doraisa, a real Meiser, you're not supposed to do that only b'docheg. So what he's asking a kasha where he's not so makbid on a lav, on a kasha that we're discussing Misa Doraisa, where it's either Misa b'Yishmaim, Misa b'Yadam. So the Gemara says most of Rasheshes lav, you can't eat Meiser Sheni without redeeming it or taking your shalayim. Well, the might most of Rasheshes, okay, Rasheshes kasha. Rabbi Yosef gave him a good answer. What was his answer? Rav Meir is makbid on eating. When it comes to eating Meiser Sheni, he's makbid. Meaning, if you ate Meiser or Trumas Meiser of the Mai, there he's makbid. But redeeming, he's not so makbid. So that wasn't a bad answer. According to Rav Shesh's poor kasha, Rav Yosef gave him a good answer. Ela Ravina, this last kasha that we started with today's daf from the 10th line, Masa Ravina, El Ravina, Adamos, Menachem. Why is he asking kasha from Nachman? What was the kasha? If Rav Meir is so makbid even Rabbanan, why does he say when you buy breads from Menachem, which is like a baker who buys from different people, and there might be some that they gave meiser, some that didn't give meiser, and maybe you're going to be mafresh from Chiv al Ptur. Why are you asking kash from Nachman? L'sayel palter. Bring a proof to him from a palter. Palter is also like a wholesaler. Rashi is a palter, is like we call that pas palter today also. The pas palter, if you buy stam bread and you're in Wyoming somewhere and you don't have a kosher bakery, can you buy what they call pas palter? If you know that they didn't put in any treif components in there, butter or milk or something like that was treif. Palter Rashi says who leading kickers because it's like a wholesaler. He buys from many and he sells to shops, to stores, to makolets and to bakers. And bakers buy from many people too. There's different levels. So why are you asking a kasha on a Rav Meir from Nachtom? Bring a proof from Palter. Right? I'm going to buy breads from Palter. Ma'aser min kotvos. You have to take meiser from every loaf. From every loaf. Why? Because the loaves can come from different households. Maybe he bought from 10 different households. Maybe 4 of the households did take trumas and meisers, and they're even though they're amaratzim, and the other 6 didn't. So if you take from one, if you just take, let's say, 1 out of 10, maybe you're taking from chiyav al ptur and you didn't take the meiser. So what you do is you take on each loaf. So from each loaf you take, then you're guaranteed that you gave meiser properly. So right, Rav Meir. So you see, Rav Meir is makbid over there. So you're asking a kasha from Nachton, being a proof from Palter to Rav Meir. Elamaislam, what are you going to give an answer? Palter matreif l'asay gabri seven. A Palter buys from 2 or 3 different people. Therefore, you don't know. Maybe one gave meiser, one didn't, or maybe 2 did and 3, one didn't, whatever. So you have taken each and every loaf. Nachton nami michad gabri seven. He buys from one, even though that one might have bought from different people, but he buys from one, and therefore you're not so makbid, and you can give from one loaf on the other bus because he buys from one person. That's him saying a nachtam and a palter. Palter buys from many, and he sells to a palter buys from many. He sells to bakers and bake shops and makolets, and a nachtam only buys from one. Therefore, if he buys from one person, even though there's different forms, he buys from one person. That person either gave truma or he didn't. So if he gave from one on the other 10, on the other 9, that's okay also because you're guaranteed that you gave trumas and meises properly. Rav Amar says, oh, Shmuel Shapir Kamashani. Shmuel did give a good answer when he asked that first kasha, the first kasha that Rabbi Lazar asked. He gave a good answer. Why? Shem Misa Ba'olam. What was his kasha? What was the kasha that we started with saying that Abaye said, oh, Rabbi Lazar asked a good kasha, right? Because why was Rav Meir, why was he makbid on Trumas Meiser, which is that you have to give add on a fifth, it's only drabanan, and you're makbid about that? It's not a doraisa. The Chacham makes such a string chiyuv. So Shmuel's answer was, yeah, Rav Meir is very makbid, as you see by Gittin. So the kasha that Abaye asked was, what do you mean? Gittin is misa b'dei adam. If you're over on adultery, that's misa b'dei adam. They're killed by a court. You ask him kasha on truma. Truma is only misa b'dei shemaim. It's not as stringent. But Rabba says it's not such a. His answer isn't so bad. Rabba and Shmuel also Shapir Kumshan gave a good answer. Why? Shem misa b'dei, because we're still talking about misa. He agrees that Rav Shesh's kasha is not such a good kasha because we're talking about misa and he's talking about only a lav. What are you asking a kasha and a lav? But Rav Meir's not as makbid when it comes to a drabanan. In other words, if the original sin is a lav, so Rav Meir's not so makbid on a drabanan of that lav. But a drabanan of a da'oraisa that involves misa, like eating truma b'mezid involves misa b'shemayim, and being over on B'fanei nechta, which is talking about getting remarried, talking about adultery, even though B'fanei nechta is only drabanan, but the basic issue that we're talking about is adultery, which is a deraisa, and therefore the first kasha that he says, the first answer that Shmuel gave on Rav Lazar's kasha is not bad, but if he agrees that Rav Shesh's kasha is not such a good kasha. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Vav Amar Aleph. What is ana? Ana is fraud. We talked about that. If you take 1/6, less than a 6, you're mochel right away. You go into a store and for a $100 item you paid $110. Okay, mochel, it's less than a 6, less than 16 and change percent. So it's okay. If it's more than ona, if it's more than 6%, if it's more than 1/6 rather, we say batal mekach. It's like mekach tos. When it comes to if it's exactly a 6, the halacha is what? That you give the 6 back, but the deal is solid. The deal stays. You can't go back on the deal. You just have to return that 1/6. But the following things, there's no no. When it comes to these things, there's no fraud at all. Based on Sukkim, Elgram Shelam Enough. Avadim, slaves. We'll see why. Buying and selling Avadim Kananim, slaves. There's no what if you pay, you're overpaid, no problem. You're underpaid, nobody's cheated. There's no fraud when it comes to that. There's no price. We'll see why. Is it psukim or is it svara? Vashtaras, say a star. Okay, a star, there's no fraud on that because a star really has no intrinsic value. It's basically only for proof. Now, we'll see if the star has intrinsic value. Let's say you're selling the star for the paper. Paper is rare. You're selling, let's say, but certain trades use paper. Pardon? Yes, but an IOU, it's not the paper which makes you chayiv. It's the proof that I lent you money, which is the issue. So the point there is, if it's an IOU, if I sell you the loan, that's different. Sell you the loan. All right, but the IOU says in it that you owe me $100, right? So what's the fraud over here? You know what you were doing. There's no fraud. Right? You know what you were doing. We said before, even if the amount is different, but everybody knew what they were doing, right? It was very clear. They said, yeah, I know it, despite that I want to pay. You're buying an IOU for you have an IOU that let's say that I owe you $100, right? Now you don't want to wait till it comes due in June and somebody wants to buy it for you for $50. That's okay. It's all up front. But it's the paper itself. The paper itself, if it's not an IOU, what are you selling? You're selling the proof that the loan took place. That's what the IOU is. But the paper itself doesn't have intrinsic value. If the paper has intrinsic value, then there could be, as we'll see. So there's no fraud on avadim shtaris karka. Karka has no value. There's no, whatever the price is. If there would be nobody would be able to sell a house today because you bought the house for $100,000 and you're selling it for $20 million, right? So every deal would be off. Hektish also, there's no fraud when it comes to hektish. If let's say you have an animal of hektish that had a mum and you have to sell it off, there's no fraud when it comes to that, whether it's a 6 more, 6 less, or even more than that, as we'll see. Or if the Bezdin of the hektish, the gizber of hektish sells something. Elam Pishlam Kefil, there's also no kefil there, as we'll see, because kefil is only on something which between regular commoners, not hektish, and it's also something which is yad to yad. Right? There's no kefil there. And there's no 4 or 5. Remember, if there's no kefil, you can't have 4 or 5 anyway, because without kefil, it's only 3 and 4, not 4 and 5. But the 4 and 5 is really on a shore and set anyway. So it only applies to hegdish, because hegdish can have a shore or set. Obviously, if we're talking about avodim or karka, there's no 4 and 5 there anyway, because 4 and 5 is only on animals, right? Shamachim and nishba. A shamachim does not swear. Normally, he has to swear that he wasn't hegdish. He doesn't swear on karka or avodim or anything like that. Or if he's a hired hand, right? A hired watchman, and a mashalim also doesn't pay on that because there's no on karka, you can't steal karka, and avodim, as we'll see, are compared to karka, etc. So there's nothing there. Shimon Omer, kachim there, he says that kachim there is an exception. Kachim shuchai b'churasim. What is kachim shuchai? If I say harei alai, I take it upon myself to pay, meaning to bring this animal. Right, I'm going to bring an animal to Beis Mikdash, right? So then, if the animal gets lost or stolen, I'm responsible for it. So that I have some ownership in it. So there is no there because it's not really just hegdish; it's also I'm responsible for it. So I have some ownership. If you're not chai b'churasim, for example, if I said harei zu ola, if I said this animal's an ola, if the animal gets lost or stolen, not responsible for it. It's all hegdish. There's no there. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. These things have no price. Sefer Torah can be worth anything, right? Or animals that are worth a lot of money for some reason, for mating or whatever, or magolas or jewelry like precious stones, right? Pearls, whatever. There's no there. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said because there's no value to it. Some people value it so much. Like we said, there's a lot of emotional value, right? Or what's the word, Michael? Sentimental value, right? Yeah. Only the ones that have no are only things we said. Avodim stars, karka, and hektish. But everything else, there is a value to it. There is that when it comes to those things. Manani Mili. What's the source of this idea that there's no on karka? When it comes to we had this possible. If you sell something to your colleague, you buy something from him. Then it says al tonu ishas chavero, right? You shouldn't you shouldn't commit fraud against your friend. So davar nik miyad liyad, right? Something or your brother. Altonu ishes achav is the pasuk, right? Davar nik miyad liyad, something which goes hand to hand. Metaltlin. Yatsu, that's yatsu karka. So this excludes karka. Shein metaltlin. It's not movable. Yatsu avadim shukish hakavos. Avadim are compared to karka in many places. V'snachatam simach the v'nechem karka. Yatsu shtaros, it excludes shtar. It's got to be a sale. Right? Shegufa machor. It's body is sold. That's when you sell an item, you sell the item itself. Begufa kani yatsu shtar she'en gufa machor. You're not selling the piece of paper. The piece is simply a proof of purchase or a proof of the transaction. Bein gufa kani. You're not really getting the paper. Bein om de'elarai. It's only for proof. So therefore, those things are excluded from the whole parsha of Onah. Elarai shabbat. We can't remember that we said, let's say let's say I sell my star, I sell paper. Some people need the paper. I sell them to a perfumer. A perfume dealer uses the paper to cover up the perfumes or whatever trade it was. Let's say you use the paper for a printer or whatever. Yeshlam, there is no there because there you're selling the paper itself for its intrinsic value. Think more pshit isn't obvious. The book of context, we had this the other day. The Mafkana ain't Ona Laprutus. He said there's Ona only applies, let's say, to silver money, but not for nechoshes, not for proper like pennies. There's no for small coins, small value coins. There's no there. Kamashma there is. There's a machlokas about that. Rav Kana said there is no. Here he said there is no because even though you're selling paper which isn't worth much, but there is no there. Why are hektish excluded? We understand the pasuk before talked about chisim kumat. It's got to be something which is movable, and slaves are excluding nadlan, real estate, and slaves are compared to that, and excludes stars which have no intrinsic value. What about hektish? It says altonu ish es achid. Don't commit fraud against your brother. Right, achav lo hektish, not hektish. That's why hektish is excluded. Maskil Rav Marmamo, just because it says yad, it says chisim mimkar misecha okanami yad amisecha. So we said davar nik miyadar. It's something that goes from hand to hand, immovable. So it's only that. That's why karka is excluded, and avodim are compared to karka. So just because it says yad, that means only things that are movable. Every place where it says yad, it means only something which is handed over, something which is movable. He took all his land from him, mi yado. So yado, obviously, all the land was not in his hand physically, right? He was holding all the land in his hand. It can be. So it means from his possession. Yado just means possession. So you could say here also, it means from his possession. It doesn't mean literally from his hand. So maybe it just means possession, and therefore there should be on real estate, and therefore also on avodim. So the Gemara now says the opposite. Where it says yada does not mean yada. When it comes to a geneva, if you burgled something and it was found it in your hand, you're chayv to pay kefil. Yado. That's only in his hand physically. How do I know? Not only if it's in his hand physically, let's say it's on his roof, in his courtyard, certainly in his house, in his enclosure, and certainly in his house, if it's in his possession, the double lashon means you find it anywhere. Oh, time because it says in that's why it includes things other than his hand. It wouldn't be for himatzei to matzei. The other mamash I would say means literally his hand. Whoever says yad means that. You find that if you caught him, what they say, red-handed. What does red-handed mean? I don't know what red-handed means, but it's in his hand, right? Well, you caught him red-handed. It's in his hand. Maybe that's what it means. Vesual is another proof. It says v'nasa b'yada by a get. It says right because of the same Jesus v'nasa b'yada. You have to give the isha if you're divorcing her in her hand. Ein le'el yada. That's only her hand, literally her hand. How do I know anywhere in her possession, like on her roof, in her courtyard, in a certain enclosure? It says like Rashi explains, it should have said uviyado titnena, put in her hand. Why did it say binasan biyada? That extra lashon of binasan biyada, right? To tell me that includes gag, chatzer, and karpif also. Time because of Rachman binasan. Because of yada yada mamish, maybe it's literally in her hand, right? So here in these places, yad means literally hand. If it wouldn't have included something extra, Rashi's middle of uviyada titnena. right? This you got to put it in the hand. It says v'nasan biyada. He emphasized it's got to be in her hand. How do I? I'm sorry. If yada, then it would have been the normal lashon. V'nasan includes gaga chaser v'kafefa. But if it wouldn't be for that v'nasan, I would have said that it means only her hand. So here you see in places by the ganaf and by giving a get to isha means yad means yield their hand. Elakol yada yada mamish. When it says yada, it means literally hand. V'shayni hasam. So what about the case of the land where he said and he's that can't really all the land cannot be lived physically in his hand. Shayni hasam it's impossible to say otherwise. In other words, yad always means literally hand, unless it can't mean hand, because you can't have all the fields in your hand. Right? Shiny also like Ella Bishusa. You can't say it there, it means Bishus. But normally, if it can mean hand, it means hand only. What happens if you rent it? So we said if I purchase land, you buy land from me, or I buy land from you. So we say there, okay, there's no, right? Because it's not yad liyad. What about you rent land? What about renting? Is there a no there too? I charge you too much rental of the land or a house or whatever it was. At a sale, but not renting. Is there no difference? Abai says miksiv memkolov. Does it say a sale forever or until Yovel? Memker stamiksiv. It means any sale. Also, in its day, for its day is also a sale. Meaning, the Gemara says this very often. We'll have it throughout the Zikin that a rental is a sale for a period of time. That's really what it is. It's a sale for a period of time. And that's what we're defining here too. And therefore, there's no ona either on a rental. Boy, Rava, chit mizar b'karka. What happens if I bought some wheat and I planted it in the ground? Now, is it karka or is it, I bought some wheat seeds, wheat kernels, and I planted in the ground. Is there ona on that sale? If I put it in the ground, now it's karka. What do you say? Now, yesh no, ain't no. Command are the seeds as if they're put in a pitcher, in a container? And if there is or not, they're movables. Or maybe they become bottle, they become secondary or voided in the ground. In other words, now they're part of the ground. What's the example of here? If you tell me, let's say, if it's a case where he said, listen, I want 6 measures of seed, right? Whatever the measure is, I want 6 measures of seed. He says, it's only 5, he only gave 5. Well, then there's for sure anything which involves a measure, a weight, or a count, even if it's less than enough, even if it's only 2% or 1% cheating, it goes back because there isn't a, just like we say those things are not bottle, right? We say goes back. Why? Because that's mekach tos. I bought 100 units of something. You only gave me 99. Well, it's less than a 6. Yeah, but I bought 100. Give me 100. Or I bought 100 measures or 100 pounds of something. I bought 100 pounds of meat, and you gave me 98. Well, it's less than a 6 cheating. Yeah, but I bought 100. You mean there's then even less than a. So here, if I bought 6 measures of seed and you only gave me 5, of course you're chayiv there. El damer iu shadoi b'kei the boy. Like what happened was this. I said put in enough seed in the ground to make it grow nicely, which is necessary. He didn't put in the amount necessary to make the stuff grow. So now we're not talking about a measure exactly. So now the question is there ona or not? Is it karka or is it seeds? Is it like you put the seeds in a pitcher, meaning they're loose, they're movables? There is ona. Or are they bottled to the ground? In other words, they're part of the ground now. And the other question also is we said in the Mishnah, you don't swear. Not only is there no ona on karka, but you don't make a shvu on karka. Nishban or nishban. Are they a karka? Would you swear in them? If, for example, there was a shomer wouldn't swear, a shomer wouldn't have to swear, but also let's say mother b'mixas. We know in Torah you swear usually where only when it's 8 kedekto, when there's 1 8 against you, not 2. Or if you're mother b'mixas, I say I lent you $100 and your motive that I only lent you $25, right? So your motive under 25 and you deny the rest. So over here, let's say you also deny partially. Is there a shvur? Would you make a shvur or not? If it's karka, you don't make a shvur in karka. Nishbar lamb or nishbar lamb. Command the shut again, is it like it's in a picture of a lane? You'd swear, or is it part of the ground now? Omer, Matira, no, listen, what's today? Tesayin Benisan, right? Today is the second day of Pesach. What do we bring today? Which carbon? The Omer, which is matir, the fruit to be eaten, right? So here we talk about Omer. Today is second day of Pesach. Einish Bonalayan. Do you say, okay, Omer, is the Omer matir that I'm out? If it's in the ground, if it's been planted in the ground, anything which took root already, the Omer is matir, that stuff to be eaten, right? Matirin. Echidami. So Gemara says, what do you mean? They're very so either ashurish tanin, it had it taken root, we know about that, the halacha there. And if it didn't take root, we know the halacha. Why? Ditzanan, right? Ditzanan, we learn if the seeds took root before the omer, then omer matir, then the carbon omer that you bring today, or if they didn't bring a carbon omer like today, when we can't bring a carbon because they haven't built the base of Mikdash downtown yet, so there's no omer, right? But we know the day itself, right? If the day goes by, then that's good enough, and you could eat the new produce, the new wheat, all the grains, the new grains. So imish we should call them omer matir and imlav if it didn't take root yet. Asur not shiur. If it didn't take root yet, you got to wait for next year. So what kind of a kasha is that? But we understand the kasha about is it in the ground or is it not in the ground? In terms of onah, in terms of making a shvuah, but in terms of omer, it depends on take a root. The chatzdina, what happened was you harvested it already. You had planted, you harvested v'zarino, and you took the kernels from the harvest and you replanted those. So kernel omer, but also but then the omer came, the omer passed. Either they brought a carbon, or when there was no carbon, the day passed. Below Asher, and it didn't take the second time that you put them back in the ground, they didn't take root yet. But below Asher's kernel omer before you omer. Mao. Can you take them out of the ground and eat them? They hadn't taken root. Command the shut and it's as if you harvested already, it's as if you put them in a pitcher, and therefore the omer affected them, and the omer now allows you to eat them. The omer allowed you to eat it. It was matter them to be eaten. Or do you say no? It's bottled to the ground, and therefore it's in the ground. If it's bottled to the ground, then it's part of the ground, and it hasn't taken root yet, right? In other words, it had taken root once before, and you harvested it. Now you put it back in the ground. So do you say it's part of the ground, and therefore it's not harvested yet, or do you say no? It's like you put them back in there. It hadn't taken root again yet, or hadn't taken root yet. But if it's in the ground, then it's bottled to the ground, and if it's part of the ground, there's no shvuah, and etc. So that's the issue that we're dealing with. So these questions stand. The questions stand. If you bought wheat and they planted it in the ground, we didn't really answer that kasha, right? It wasn't where you took a certain measure, because then for sure it's mekachtos, it's bottled. Or do you say, so if you're talking about where you said I bought enough to plant to cover this area, and you didn't do enough? So that's the question: is there a no there? Do you make a shvu on it? And is Omer matir it in this weird case where you had replanted it? Amar Rava B'chasa. Rava said that Rav Chasa said, "Boy, Rav Ami." The Rav Ami asked this kasha. Listen to this. We just said in all these cases, when it comes to karka or shtaros or avodim and hektish, that there's no, right? If you cheated by a sixth, right, there's no rule of ono that you don't have to give the money back. It says ono ema bitul mekreation. What happens if it's more than that? When we talk about fraud, remember the only fraud that you return exactly is if it's exactly 1/6, less than a 6-year mochel. More than a 6 is batal mekach. So when you say there's no here, do you mean there's no rule of 1/6? But if it was more than a 6, there is batal mekach, because that's like mekach tos. Oh no, ein lahem batal mekach yeshlem. Oh, ein lahem, or not, or there's no fraud at all. Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman said that Hadar Rav Chasa, after he brought down the kasha that Rav Ami asked, he then said Pasha Rav Ami, who had asked the kasha, was posheted the no ein lahem batal mekach yeshlem. He says there is no no, but there is bitul mekach. If it's more than a 6, there is fraud there, and the deal is off. It's like mekach tos. Now the next line, Rav Yona Omer Ekdeshus, is a new halacha, is a new thing. But here he's saying that there's no no of a 6, but if it's more than a 6, there is bitul mekach. That would be considered mekach tos. That's what the Gemara seems to say. But if you look at the Rambam Seich and the Rambam says on ein lahen, right? There's the Rambam sign is on ein lahen, meaning that when we say there's no matter how much was cheated, you know, man, how much Tosfos goes on to and says maybe if you cheated by 50%, then it is. But the Rambam's mashma, then no matter what it is, these are like blind items. Remember, like Rav Yehuda going to say in the Mishnah that the Sefer Torah, Behema, Margolis, sometimes you need things that are blind items or sentimental value. Then there is no Onah there. And he says, no, we only exclude from Onah the rules of Avodim, Shtaris, Karka, and Hegdish. There's no Onah there. When we say there's no Onah, and not only on a sixth, but even if it's more than a sixth, there's no Betamek, there's no Mekachtos. And as we said before, when it comes to Onah, there's certainly no Onah when it's clear what you're doing. If I say, listen, I know the car is worth only $100, it's a shmata, it's an old jalopy, but I want $10,000 for it. If you want it, you understand, then there's no fraud there because it was clear up front. So as long as everybody knows what they're doing, the fraud is only when you were cheated. You cheated, you overpaid or underpaid. If you underpaid, then the mocher got cheated. If you overpaid, you got cheated. So there we talk about the rules of a sixth, less than a sixth, more than a sixth, but all those rules don't apply to karka, avodim, shtaros, and hekdeshis. All right, we'll pick it up from here, the seventh line tomorrow, Rav Yona. Rav Yona, Markdeshis, Rav Yomir, Markdeshis. We'll pick it up here tomorrow. Moadim l'simcha to everybody called to.